All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's conversation, Nigeria 2023, the new Electoral Act and Road Ahead. I'm Christopher O'Connor, a Senior Program Manager for Africa at the National Endowment for Democracy. NED is a private nonprofit foundation dedicated to the growth and strengthening of democratic institutions around the world. For close to 3 decades, the endowment has supported local civil society organizations working to advance Nigeria's democracy. In concert with our core partners, we remain committed to this objective about 10 months out from Nigeria's 2023 national elections. Today, I am joined by 3 guests who are deeply engaged in Nigeria's preparations for these elections. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our speakers on screen, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, spokesperson of the House of Representatives and Chair, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs, as well as Barrister Festus Okoye, a National Commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission. And on stage with me, Samson Otodo, a longtime endowment partner and friend and Executive Director of Yaga Africa. Thank you, speakers, for joining. And Ben, we greatly appreciate the late night participation on your end. Additional biographical details can be found in the invitation. At a time when democracy is increasingly under threat across the world, Nigeria's 2023 elections are incredibly important. These elections will determine how Nigeria grapples with growing insecurity, economic headwinds, and an increasing vocal citizenry, and if it emerges a more peaceful, prosperous, and democratic state. These elections come on the heels of a streak of military coups in the region in Mali, Sudan, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. As Africa's largest elections, they have the ability to revitalize democracy in the region or to rapidly accelerate its unraveling. And depending on how one counts, these elections are also the 5th or 6th largest democratic elections in the world. Nigeria's 2023 elections, poorly executed, perfectly executed, or somewhere in between, will have immense domestic, regional, and global implications. The concerns ahead. Nigeria has a mixed electoral record. Domestic and international observers criticized the 2019 national elections on numerous fronts. Candidates and parties were accused of exploiting state resources, buying votes, manipulating results, and perpetrating acts of electoral violence. INEC came under criticism for failing to assert its independence, communication lapses, and severe logistical deficiencies. Perhaps most worryingly, the last national elections saw the lowest voter turnout since civilian rule was restored in 1999, a mere 35%, raising troubling questions about public buy-in in the system. But in the aftermath of the 2019 elections, there's been intense public pressure for electoral reform. After years of robust consultation with and pressure from civil society and INEC, the National Assembly passed and the Buhari administration signed the Electoral Act 2022, a comprehensive attempt to address some of the most glaring electoral framework challenges in the country. Congratulations to you 3 on the passage of this act, and congratulations to the Nigerian people. This is a starting point for today's conversation. Our speakers will present for approximately 7 minutes each, sharing their perspectives on the importance of the new Electoral Act, what it can potentially achieve, and what other issues require urgent attention to deliver a democratic win in Nigeria in February next year. Following the 3 presentations, I'll then ask a few questions before turning it to the audience. For those joining online, please send us questions via email at asknedevents@ned.org. And for all participants, please state your name and affiliation before posing a direct question. With that, I will turn the floor to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today. And I want to recognize the great job that you are doing for the advancement of our democracy. And you are not alone in this work. I appreciate NED. I appreciate what Yaga Africa is doing among other CSOs around the country who has partnered with government to ensure that the advancement of our democracy is not just left for government alone, and that through these platforms that you have created, both directly and also through other CSOs. The public participation in a participatory democracy has been enhanced. The knowledge of the principles of democracy, the expectation, and how it should be measured has been highlighted severally using this platform. As you know, Nigeria as a democratic entity and signatory to various international frameworks, such as Article 17 of the African Union Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, Article 6 of the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, and as well as Article 21 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We are obligated to ensure at all times that the conduct of free, fair, inclusive, and credible election is a burden that must be discharged. It's an obligation that we owe Nigerians, especially we as members of Committee of Nations, so that when we meet for peer review, we'll be able to measure well. It is apparent that there is a linkage between credible elections and political stability, and as well as clear benefits to the economic and the social space. They are linked together. And Nigeria wants to enhance the economic benefits in this country as well as create a healthier social space to ensure that our electoral system meets the 4 criteria of a credible election, which, as you know, includes inclusiveness, transparency, accountability, competitiveness. A reform of our electoral system was expedient, quite expedient because the people said so, quite expedient because the definition of democracy, which is government of the people, by the people, and for the people, has positioned the people at the center stage, both in the process of becoming leaders in the country and while leading in a democratic system. Because of this, the National Assembly, under the leadership of the Speaker, Representative Femi Gbajabiamila, took it as one of the major tasks that we should put on the front burner in the Ninth Assembly. And that was why in our legislative agenda for the Ninth Assembly, we prioritize on electoral reform. You don't reform what is healthy. You reform what has, as you highlighted, all those bottlenecks that has impeded, that has stopped us from advancing our democracy from where it is to where it ought to be, if not completely, if not comfortably, at least closely. So this electoral bill, we found out that the old one had some gaps that does not represent the ethos and of democracy, the principles of democracy. It does not represent what the people want. It does not increase transparency, has not increased accountability, has not increased inclusiveness, has not been made to be as competitive as it ought to be. And so we took time to look at about 158 clauses of that particular old bill and try to integrate what we believe based on our consultation, town hall meetings, and other engagement that will, make us drive closer to the expectations of the ethos of democracy. Clause 52 was one of them, and which has become Section 52 now, which has to do with the empowering of INEC with the discretionary power to deploy electronic transmission of results, the ETR. This has been an issue for quite a long time, and you cannot say you will avoid technology in your bid to mitigate malpractices. You cannot avoid technology if you really want to increase transparency and if you want to increase electoral integrity. You must embrace technology because this is what the world is embracing at the moment. It's an innovation that has helped systems to account better. So that was why the reason behind that Section 54. We also went in and looked at section, which is currently Section 87, on the mandate to parties to conduct primaries in a particular way. We had started with, making it direct primaries, and with major consultations and referrals from the presidency, we decided to broaden the scope by increasing it from direct primaries to indirect primaries, as well as consensus arrangement in political parties, because we wanted to democratize political parties and mitigate godfatherism, which is actually huge in Nigeria. So that's the reason behind fighting for 87, Section 87. Time will not allow me to go deeper into that. But also another interesting section is Section 43, Sub 1, and Paragraph 3, which has to do with express provision for electronic voting machines, which we call the EVMs. The use of technology, like I mentioned before, will help us encourage transparency. Before now, we've had a lot of issues with how voting is conducted, and so many frowned at electronic voting, and we had a lot of cases in court, and we tried to say, what do we do about that? I'll just jump through, because you're giving me 7 minutes. I'll just jump through all of them now, just to give you an idea of the reasons behind some of the sections that we put in there. And we looked at also on the issue of inclusiveness. Nigeria is about 220 million people, and we have over 10% of our people with disability. So we call them people with disabilities. Before now, our Electoral Act did not include them the way they're supposed to be included. 27 million people in Nigeria with disability has been included in the current amendment that we have made, and we're sure that they will no longer be defranchised. So that will increase the integrity of the fairness element of our electoral process in the coming election. And we have also clearly provided for the use of card readers, which has resolved the card reader contention that plagued the last general election cycle. And we have made sure that political parties, members of political parties are stopped from taking up employment with this unbiased umpire called the INEC, the Electoral Commission, because of conflict of interest, to prevent conflict of interest in the electoral system, where you have a member of APC or PDP holding particular office in this system that conducts election. We have tried to remove that. We have also taken steps with regards to the independence, increasing the independence of the INEC, the electoral body that handles the election, by ensuring that they have early release of fund. Before now, they struggle with logistics. They struggle with logistics because their money come about 6 months to election. And you agree with me, considering our terrain in Nigeria, to conduct an effective or efficient election that is credible, that is fair, you can't do that within 6 months. By the logistics supposed to start earlier than that. We have been able to cure that mischief with a particular section in the current Electoral Act. So there is hope. I'm sure they are more motivated to plan ahead of time. And also we have increased the deadline for stopping voter registration, from 30 days to 90 days before an election. This will ensure that no one is defranchised, because INEC would have sufficient time to produce everyone's voter's card, including those of late registrant. We have also electronic register of voters has been included, where you have INEC is now mandated to maintain the register of voters in electronic format in its central database, in addition to manual format, which means accessibility to data will be easier now. And that is where the world is going, so that you don't just sit somewhere and compute result. The reference point will not be on the data bank of INEC, what they have stored over time. And then substitution of candidate. In the event of the death of a candidate in a by-election, the political party now has 7 days, to submit the name of a candidate. Limiting the substitution of candidates in a by-election to only cases where the candidate dies is a progressive amendment, because it limits the controversies arising from party primaries. It also reduces election costs, facilitates effective election planning. And there is also what we have included, which is inspection of electoral material. Before, it was like a secret affair. It's not open. It's not as open as it's supposed to be. So inspection of electoral materials, polling unit agents and accredited election observers can now use video. An organization like yours, an organization like IAGA can now use videos and photographs to inspect and record their inspection of original election materials before election starts. That you will find in Section 41 of our new Electoral Act. This will help you have information prior to the election, so that when they have computed You'll be able to verify based on what you have seen and what they have provided. Parties to inspect format of ballot papers. Before now, INEC must now, before now it was shrouded in secrecy also, and it has led to a lot of complaints and people complaining that they have been excluded unlawfully from participating in the election. So now INEC must now invite parties not later than 20 days to the election to inspect samples of relevant electoral materials to confirm that the names and the identities of their candidates are printed correctly. And the parties now have 2 days after this inspection to file any complaint. This amendment will reduce complaints of unlawful exclusion often used by parties to disrupt the conduct of elections. This is what this particular section seeks to achieve. And also, no, it's not now open for everybody to be a polling agent. Notice of appointment of polling agents sent to INEC by political parties must be accompanied by 2 passport photographs and a signature specimen of each appointed polling agent. This will prevent the arbitrary deployment of thugs and disruptors to election under the guise of polling agent. Because what has been happening, the security aspect of it, people come in wearing tags, unaccredited, only for them to cause problems in the course of the election. They are not really polling agents. They are there to cause problems. So this particular act has made provision for that. And also form that will be used at the election to reduce the use of fake forms and electoral materials. An election conducted at polling units without prior recording in the prescribed form of the quantity, serial number, and particulars of result sheet and other electoral materials shall now be invalid. So you don't just create any form or keep it away from those who are participating in the election. You have to make it open. People have to take the serial number, the particulars of the result sheet, so that even if you want to write your result from home and then throw it into INEC vault or throw it at INEC, that has been cured by this particular act. So 2023 is looking very good. Now, just give me 2 minutes and I'll be done. The 9th issue or the 11th issue that I want to look at is the strict penalty for contravention of section 227 of our constitution, which prohibits the retention of organizations or quasi-military organization to be used for the display of force to promote any political objective. Before now, people will gather themselves into group and say, we are this particular group and we have the energy, we have the force to disrupt election and all the rest of them and create fear in the system and threaten people who are supposed to, exercise their franchise. They will run back home. Now the law says, before now, it was 500,000 naira if you offend, if you're a first offender. We have increased it to 5 million. Before now, second offender was 700,000 naira. Now it is 7 million. And also 50 to 500,000 naira for every day that offense continues. For every day you continue in that offense. And also we have even increased it to 3 years imprisonment, from 3 years imprisonment to 5 years imprisonment for aiding and abetting. So this is to give a sense of security to those who want to participate. Another one which I want to round up with, because I don't really have time, is the issue of merger of parties. The notice period required by INEC from political parties seeking to merge has now been increased from 90 days to 9 months. So you don't come at the end of the day when all the logistics have been put in place and you say you're merging, causing extra costs for the INEC body in the organization of the election, which will now trickle down to manipulations and people being denied access that is supposed to, people being defranchised. This will aid INEC now. With this particular provision, INEC will be aided in logistic planning. It will cut waste of resources and ensure it is easier for INEC to engage the accurate voter awareness and education program. The time is short enough, but I think this is some of the things we have put together to make sure that we approach 2023 with more confidence. We approach 2023 knowing that we are now better than how we were when we started. Remember, it has been a struggle. This particular piece of legislation has gone to the president 6 times. And it is through our collaboration, our understanding that though we are 3 arms of government, we are one part of we are part of the government. That has made us through lobbying, through a lot of intervention to make sure that Mr. President assented to this bill. There has been another issue finally, what I want us to look at is the issue of implementation. So there is still room for your investment. There is still room for you to support those who are in the field working. One thing is good law. Another one is the implementation of this law. I have seen the body language of Nigerians they want to implement with what is happening with the primaries.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'd like to just, I appreciate the very comprehensive overview of the Electoral Act. And I think, once again, congratulations on getting that passed and signed. We wish you luck with that. I think you bring up a very compelling point about implementation as the next step. I'd like to turn it now to Festus to hear the INEC perspective about what this act means, but also other issues that may need to be addressed and where there may need to be support both domestically and internationally to execute a strong democratic election.
Let me thank you and also thank the INEC for putting together this particular program. I think the program is very timely and it will also ginger a lot of efforts in relation to solidifying our electoral process. Now, there is no doubt whatsoever that the Electoral Act 2022 is a progressive piece of legislation. And it is also a product of a multi-stakeholder intervention in the electoral process. Before the passage of the bill itself, before it became law, the Independent National Electoral Commission had made a lot of proposals to the National Assembly in relation to some of the challenges we have in the electoral process and some of the issues we believe should be emphasized, and some of the issues we believe should be a petition from the law for us to have a very good law. Now, there are some germane issues that have been imputed into the new electoral legal framework. As Benjamin pointed out, one, the issue of timely release of funds to the Independent National Electoral Commission is key and fundamental to the electoral process. Two, the law has validated the Commission's use of technology in the electoral process, especially for purposes of accreditation of voters and also for purposes of making our electoral process much more accountable. The law has also changed the timelines for doing a lot of things, thereby giving the Independent National Electoral Commission a lot of room to maneuver and also a lot of room to get certain things done without fearing that time was going to run against it. Now, there's also the change in the entire matrix of the nomination process of political parties. Prior to this particular period, we had challenges with the nomination processes of political parties, but now we have a lot of time to do with the issue of nomination of candidates. And then there's also the issue which here also talked about relating to the power of the Commission to review declarations and returns that were made in violation of the law and also in violation of our processes. And there's also the whole issue about judicial intervention in the electoral process. Now, even before the passage of this particular Electoral Act 2022, the Commission had asked the question in its review of the 2019 elections and also in its review of the elections with the different critical stakeholders. We asked basically three questions. One, what did we do so well that we don't have to worry about the way we do it? That's the first question. The second question we asked is, what did we not do so well enough that we must improve on the way we do it? And the third question we asked is, what did we do so badly that we must find a new way of doing it? These were the issues that has been guiding the Commission in our approach to the 2023 general election, and also in our approach to the implementation of the new electoral legal framework. Now, in relation to our election planning and election administration, even before the passage of the law, we took a proactive step of auditing our local government and state offices and our zonal stores to know the type of the quantum of equipment we still have in terms of non-sensitive materials, and thus then know whether we need to begin early enough to acquire ballot papers, ballot boxes, ballot boxes, cubicles, and other non-sensitive materials. The second thing we did was that we also accelerated our procurement processes and our procedures even before the formal release of funds to the Commission. It is also very fundamental to note that this Commission created additional polling units after a period of 26 years. For 26 years, the Commission operated on the basis of 119,974 polling units. And as at the time these polling units were created, Nigeria had a total registered voter population of 50 million. We went into the 2019 general election with a total registered voter population of 84 million, with the same number of polling units. So what we have done is to create additional polling units. And now in Nigeria, we now have a total of 176,846 polling units. And we have decongested the existing polling units and also taken some of these polling units to the people who need them. And so that persons with disability can access the polling units easily, the elderly can access these polling units easily, and so on. We have also concluded on our strategic plan and the election project plan for this particular election. So we are in a very, very good position as of now in relation to the election. Now we had challenges with the issue of logistics in terms of moving our staff and materials to the polling units, and also in terms of deployment of security agents to the various polling units on election day. We are dealing with some of these things, trying to find an alternative means of doing things. And under the auspices of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, we are trying to deal with the issue of logistic challenges. Now, in terms of the issue of deployment of technology in the electoral process, what the law has done is to solidify and validate some of the technological innovations and creative approaches the Commission has adopted in terms of the electoral process. Before the law was passed, we had started what we call the continuous voter registration exercise. And we had deployed a new device called the INEC, that is the INEC voter enrollment device. And we also created an online platform through which prospective voters can start their the process of registration before going to our offices to go and capture their fingerprints and also capture their faces. We have also deployed what we call the bimodal voter accreditation system, which is a fingerprint and facial technology for purposes of voter accreditation. The implication is that those who come to the polling units on election day must be the duly registered voters. We cannot authenticate your fingerprints and we cannot authenticate your facials. The implication is that you are engaged in identity theft and we will never allow you to vote in the election. We also did deploy what we call the IREV, the INEC Result Viewing Portal, through which we are uploading polling unit level results to a central viewing point, through which Nigerians will view these results at very, very in real time. We also have what we call the INEC candidate nomination portal. Prior to this particular period, political parties will conduct their primaries and then come physically to the commission to submit the list and personal particulars of their nominated candidates. Now, we no longer have any physical interaction with them. They have to upload everything they want to do through our candidates nomination portal. And we also did the same thing for civil society groups and organizations engaged in election observation, in media, and also for political party agents. But we also realize that the more you deploy technology, the more you need to create platforms to protect the technology you deploy. So we are also looking at our cyber security platforms and trying to make sure that we protect them as much as possible. Now, in terms of the resolution of election disputes, prior to this particular period, election disputes, especially pre-election matters, go to the high courts of the various states, go to the federal high court, and also go to the high court, the high court of the federal capital territory. But now everything has been standardized. Election disputes now only go to the federal high court, and this makes for some level of certainty in the electoral process. Now, in terms of the type of role we want the international community to play in relation to this particular election, we want the international community to continue to support the technological devices and innovations of the Commission, so that we can continue to improve in the use of technology, which sometimes obviates what I call pernicious human interference in the electoral process. We also want the international community to partner with civil society groups and organizations and the Commission in the area of voter education and electoral education. And also, we also want the international community to engage more robustly with the political parties to guarantee peaceful and transparent elections. And finally, before in rounding up, I want to say that the biggest challenge facing the electoral process in Nigeria today revolves around the issue of election security. The Nigerian military are engaged in internal security operations in almost all the states of the Federation. There are some states of the Federation where the Commission cannot even deploy for purposes of voters registration. And we also have so many people in the camp for internally displaced persons that have to be registered. So all these things are going to impact on the electoral process. But under the auspices of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, we are reviewing some of these things and trying to find measures of degrading some of the security challenges to make for peaceful and credible elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Festus. That was a really in-depth overview of INEC's preparations and then some of those core concerns that are going to have to be addressed for things to proceed smoothly. Now I'll turn it over to Samson to hear his perspective from civil society and a bit of an emphasis on other things that need to be addressed in the run-up to the elections post the Electoral Act being passed.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I think let me start by paying tributes to the two gentlemen who spoke because they played critical role in the passage of the electoral law, beginning with Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who was always put on the spot and on the firing line when civil society was engaging on this issue. And I'd say that he played a critical role to the success of this. And I know we've had several bilaterals and seeking clarification on what position should pro-people legislators take in the National Assembly. But to also Barrister Festus, who is of civil society, but has moved to the other society, but is still an integral part of civil society. To say what we don't know is, and what he didn't mention was he was the chair of the committee, the part of the technical committee that reviewed and worked on the provisions of the Electoral Act. And if people like Festus weren't part of that committee that worked on these issues, this whole celebration of this Electoral Act and the provisions that were in the bill would have been different. So I just wanted to register, tributes to these two gentlemen who are not just speaking because they hold the office that they hold, but they played an integral role in the success of the electoral reform campaign. But Chris, I'll just raise three issues. First, let me begin with a paradox. And in this case, it relates to the point that the two previous speakers talked about, and it's about the independence of INEC. And the paradox is INEC's reforms or INEC's improvements and INEC's professionalism is a threat to the political class. So the more INEC improves on its technical experience and its management of the elections, the higher the political interference with the Electoral Commission. So as we think about, the 2023 elections, one of the greatest concern is how do we protect the independence of the Electoral Commission? Because the law vests a lot of discretionary powers on INEC, and we've seen attempts to populate INEC with people who are not like Festus, but even politicians and people who are members of political parties appointed into the Electoral Commission, and that has given serious source of worry, for citizens and the public. And if there's any time the institution needs some protection, it's actually now. We've seen the Commission take, positions and try to draw the attention of political actors to provisions in the law as it relates to the regulatory powers of the Commission. Even that's a positive. But I think that as we move towards the elections, INEC independence is critical on how to protect the Commission. Whether the technology that the Commission is relying on for the elections, but also around the consistency in the decisions that the Electoral Commission takes and how it is in consonance with the provisions of the law. Because INEC's independence is important for voter turnout, which is a second critical issue, and citizens' participation, that there has been a decline in the turnout of voters for elections. And our expectation is if the new law confers integrity on the electoral process, then it will boost citizens' confidence that they want to participate in the elections. If citizens still observe and grapple with issues around access to either polling stations or election logistics problems, or even interference by the state and security agencies, is going to dampen the interest of citizens to participate in the elections. And so if we recorded about 35% turnout in 2019, will we have an increase in the turnout of voters for the 2023 elections? And we are very, very concerned. There have been efforts by civil society to continue to mobilize voters. But if the parties don't throw up credible candidates, and it appears that institutions have been captured by the state, then you're going to observe a decline in the turnout of voters, for the 2023 elections. And I agree with Festus 100% that we need to invest in voter mobilization for the 2023 elections. But tied to that is to assure the Nigerian people that when they come out to vote, their security is guaranteed. And it's really at the heart of the participation for 2023. If people don't feel secure, because as it is today, the level of insecurity, then even INEC cannot even deploy, to certain areas to conduct these elections. So this is a critical issue. The third and perhaps the last point was around, if you look at the provisions of the law, whilst Festus talked about how the law has now stripped state high courts with the jurisdiction of entertaining pre-election matters and vest them in the federal high court. As it is today, based on this law, citizens have also been stripped of the powers to litigate on pre-election matters. So in the previous law, it provides if a candidate submits false documents, any person can actually sue. But what the Act now provides is that any person, citizens cannot challenge, any false document or false information provided by a candidate. That only a person who is a member of that same political party and is an aspirant that can contest the credibility of information and documents presented by a candidate. And this really poses a lot of challenge that citizens will now are stripped of that agency, to scrutinize candidates presented by political parties. And now only aspirants can do so. So pre-election matters will now become an intra-party affair. And we know, given the power asymmetries in political parties, you'd expect that a lot of the hegemons within the parties can actually suppress any attempt by party members to demand some form of accountability, and that's worrisome. And even though, yes, the Federal High Court has been vested with a lot of jurisdiction, we also see a situation where the Federal High Courts will now be bogged down with a lot of pre-election matters because these matters are now centralized. And we know that Nigeria is a litigious society. We expect to see more cases in court, pre-election matters, and we hope that the Federal High Court doesn't become overburdened with a lot of pre-election litigations that is unable to dispense justice as at when due. But given all the provisions in the law, I'd say, and I was mentioning to Carl moments ago, that this is the best piece of legislation, electoral legislation we've had since 1999. It has the potential of deepening the integrity of the elections, and I hope that in the implementation process, all the agencies and institutions that are responsible for implementing this law do so with a sense of responsibility and patriotism.
Thank you very much, Samson, for that overview, and it really rounds out the perspective from the National Assembly, INEC, now civil society, about the positive developments we're seeing with this Electoral Act, but also remaining challenges that are going to have to be overcome to deliver a truly credible and democratic election. The presentations went a bit over. So at this point, I would turn it to the floor to see if there are any questions for our panelists. I have many I can ask myself, and Zach, you can let us know from the online side. Sure. Yeah, there's a mic is coming.
Thank you very much for this important meeting this morning about Nigeria's 2023 elections. My name is Richard Klein. I'm Director for Elections at the National Democratic Institute. It's good to see old friends Samson and Festus from his days in civil society that he is constantly trying to run away from. And thank you, Honorable Member, for your important work getting this bill passed. There's been a lot of discussion about turnout in the last elections and the trend of turnout going down. Part of that is, of course, related to the functioning of INEC and the ability to deliver elections. Civil society also has an important role to play in helping inform and mobilize voters to participate. But I think in the last elections in particular, international and citizen observers highlighted the failures of political parties to speak to the issues that matter to voters and to campaign on issues rather than trying to buy their support. And I'd be interested in what elements of the Electoral Reform Act may speak to in providing incentives for political parties to try to engage voters on the issues that matter to them, which will also serve along with the other issues that Samson raised to increase turnout. And are there other reforms that are still needed to try to address this issue? Thank you.
I'll turn to the panel and see if anybody would like to respond to that. Festus, would you like to give that a go?
Yeah, I think that the issue of voter turnout in Nigeria's election has been really, really worrying. Nobody is happy about it. But at the Electoral Management Body, we have tried as much as possible to engage the Nigerian public and also increase the confidence of the Nigerian people relating to the work we do. Now, we believe that by increasing, by decongesting the existing polling units, creating additional polling units, and also taking these polling units to the people that need them, that there's a possibility that voter turnout will increase. We have also deployed the bimodal voter accreditation system, and people now know that ghosts can no longer vote in our elections, and that there's no room for somebody to come to the polling unit and claim that his or her name is on the voters register, but that the voters register did not capture the name, and then the person will be given an incident form and the person will fail. So that has completely been eliminated in our electoral process. And we believe that as of today, because of the technological drive of the commission, because of some of the changes we have introduced in the electoral process, Nigerians are beginning to reassert their confidence in the electoral process and believing that they can go to the polling units and vote and their votes will count. But nobody wants to go to the polling unit and go and vote and die. And so we must engage the security agencies and also engage the political parties to make the atmosphere at the level of the polling units serene so that people can go and vote without anything untoward happening to them. But more fundamentally, the business of the Independent National Electoral Commission is to engage in voter and electoral education around our processes and our procedures. It is the responsibility of the political parties to go out and mobilize the voters to come out and vote for them. But when political parties rely on some other extra electoral means to want to win election without going to the voters themselves, it creates this sense that the voters do not matter. But the voters in Nigeria matter because the vote is their power, and there's power in the vote, and there's value in the vote. So the moment we keep on emphasizing on the value of the vote and trying to get people trying to improve processes and procedures that makes our electoral process credible. The Nigerian people will begin once again to engage the electoral process. But I believe that the political parties have a lot of work to do, and we must also sanitize the precincts of the electoral environment to make it more conducive for people to come out and exercise their democratic franchise.
I'd like to turn back to
Can I say something there before you?
Yes, of course.
Just
of course.
Here on the. Thank you very much. I like the analysis that was given by Festus on this. The need for increased advocacy cannot be overemphasized, whether it is by the Ministry of Information or by the INEC or by the political parties. Something must be structured to make sure that the confidence of the people will be raised. Yes, one is the integrity of the electoral process will increase the confidence of the public. But also information has a way of increasing the confidence of the people. There are a lot of people who have now come to understand all the 9 years of our democracy, the benefits of it, the principle of it, whether it is worth it or not. Some don't believe in it. And it is through proper information dissemination, people will begin to embrace the ethos of democracy better than we have done before now. But I must be very specific on this number, the apathy against people who vote, people who are withdrawn. They don't want to to exercise their franchise. It's not just because they don't want to. We have to put a structure in place that will increase the data capturing mechanism of INEC. I want Festus to take this back to INEC. Most of the rural areas of this country, they're still struggling to be registered. Some of them will leave their trade daily. They will leave going to farm daily, and they will queue for hours. And only for 2 laptops to appear with a population of about 400 to 500 people, you start capturing them. When you get to 50, it's already 5 p.m. You want to go back. What happens to the 250 people? So if you don't capture those 250 people, it's not because they are not willing to vote, but because the system has not made adequate provision to capture the people, to equip them to participate in the election. So it's not just about voters apathy. It's about putting structures in place to make sure there is sufficient technology that we are using, like in Bend, the federal constituency. I am struggling where I represent. I'm struggling to have my people registered. I have requested for more machines to go there to register people, and they are rationing it. So today they are in this political world with 2 people, and the other people have to work for 2-3 weeks. And by the time after 2-3 weeks, it's going to another part. So if we really want to increase the number of people who will vote, let's increase this technology that we are using at the moment to increase voters' registration. It is only when they have their PVC that they can participate. That is what I want Festus to take back. Coming from the parliament and as a representative at the moment, I'm speaking the voice of my people. You need more machines to capture the people.
Thank you very much for that analysis. We can take the question to the right and then on the left. So we'll do 2 at once.
Thank you all for presenting. My name is Bobby King. I am a program associate from IFES. And my question is regarding Mr. Ototo's point with regards to the barring of agency and questioning fraudulent information. Where did that decision come from to bar that part from the Electoral Act? How has that decision came about, and why was that not in the current Electoral Act?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacob. I'm a graduate student at American University. My question is for National Commissioner, Mr. Festus. When you look at the provisions of the constitutions, I think Section 97 makes provisions for financial provisions for where political parties can spend the limits they can spend during election. And the new act has just jacked up the fund to around, I think, 5 billion naira for presidential aspirants, and I think about 500 million naira also for the senators. Over the years, we've complained about buying of votes and all that, but then we still see that there is an intentional act to increase the spending limit for political parties. How then do we intend to address this issue of voters buying if INEC has still allowed the House or National Assembly to increase financial spending limits? That's one. Secondly, we have seen political parties over the years deliberately violate these provisions of the Constitution. I'm not sure we have any political parties that has in turn submit or put forward to INEC how they intend to fund elections in Nigeria. But then what is INEC doing to ensure that political parties don't put in so much funds that would influence vote buying into the forthcoming general elections? Thank you.
And Zach, would you like to read the one question from online?
Yes. So this question is coming from Eric Eady. He is a program officer for Africa at the Solidarity Center. He would like to know, the voters registration period remains very limited. Like electoral bodies in many West African nations, why does voters registration take place only a month or 3 before the elections? Is INEC working to change the system to make it a multiple year-long exercise? And then secondly, can the speakers elaborate more on the inclusion of people with disabilities in the electoral process?
Okay, thank you all for those questions. Samson, would you like to address the first one, IFS?
Well, I think it's best if Festus responds to the question on the persons with disability and also most of the questions. But on the point you asked about who made the decision to strip the public of locals or the right to question false information, well, maybe Honorable Benjamin will answer that question, because they are the ones who made the law and introduced that particular clause. So they are the ones who introduced that clause. And I think that I don't know what's the rationale behind that, but stripping members of the public, of the right to question candidates presented by political parties, especially when they submit false information or fake credentials to INEC, is improper. I understand that some of the arguments advanced as to ward off or stop frivolous litigation in the court, but that would have been resolved in a different way, but not strip the public. And it means if, as a member of the public, I want to vote for a candidate and a party is marketing a candidate to me, they are equally saying that I cannot question, the credentials of the candidates. Because in the business of buying and selling, if I go to the market and you present a particular commodity, I have to ask you questions. How is this functioning? What are the serial numbers? Where was this produced? This information is relevant, but to have stripped the members of the public of the locals, to question, I think it's not ideal. Yes, on the PW, the persons with disability, one of the provisions in the Act provides that INEC shall take reasonable steps, to provide access to persons with disability. The big question is, what do we mean by reasonable steps? Because yes, it provides that INEC is compelled to do that, but what do you mean by reasonable steps? So reasonable steps will be either if INEC produces, does that mean if INEC produces some materials like Braille ballots or interpretation or magnifying glasses in a section of polling stations or across maybe 50% or 30% of polling stations, that means INEC has taken reasonable steps. Yes, we celebrate that particular provision, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, because if you look at the practical implementation of this, it still vests discretionary powers on INEC to determine what are those reasonable steps that the commission needs to take for persons with disability to vote at elections. But I'm quite aware that the Electoral Commission has provided braille ballots as well as magnifying glasses in previous elections. There's also a disability checklist, but how well that is distributed around the country is something that begs for question.
So I will turn it to Honorable Benjamin Kalu to make a response on citizens challenging some of those submissions, and then to Festus to respond to the voter registration time period and additional steps on persons with disabilities voting. I would also ask if you have a concluding point, if you could make it at the end of your response to those questions, because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, quickly. You can't cure a mischief from one side and create multiple mischief on the other side. What we're trying to do is to sanitize the electoral ecosystem to make sure that we reduce costs and distractions and increase transparency and increase orderliness in the space. And what that particular provision seeks to do is to avoid, meddlesome interlopers, people who have no business dragging a man who has presented himself for a particular position. We did not silence the right of an individual to express whatever he has discovered that is against what was presented. But that you do through the political party that has presented this individual who has another candidate. For you to go through an election process, there must be a candidate as an opposition, 2 or 3 within your party. So if I'm not contesting in this election, and Samson is contesting in this election, and Chris is contesting with Samson, and they're in the same political party, and I have information that information presented by Chris is not credible. Instead of dragging Chris directly, I move that information to his opponent in the party. The opponent will have the right to now make a presentation because he has a nexus. There's a nexus between him and the issue that is being, discussed, which is the election, the primaries. I experienced firsthand this issue where a passerby who has no interest in the election that I passed through went to court on frivolous grounds and distracted my representation for a couple of years. It was only the court that decided and said, you have no nexus, you have no locus. It is not a public right. It is an individual right. You must show that there is a link between you and the issue at stake. So my position and the position of the parliament is that you are not silenced. Move your observation, your findings through the candidate in that same party. Let the candidate, if you believe there is credibility in what you are saying, present it to save his position. So that way we'll have an organized electoral space. That is what I want to say on that, because I don't want the international body to feel that we are silencing the public from, presenting what they believe is anti-democratic ethos. Let them pass it through the individuals who are involved. And then finally, I want to thank you for organizing this. You are helping the government of Nigeria to showcase to the world our political will, our desire to meet up with expectations of democracy. It's something that is new to us. As you know, we are not as advanced as most countries in the world in democracy, but there is an effort. We are pushing forward, becoming better than we were yesterday. And your interventions, as simple as this engagement, will go a long way in strengthening the mindset of people, both within the country and outside the country, in believing that we're making the right effort towards advancing our democracy. We encourage you to do more. Implementation is where we need help. Use the CSOs, help the INEC if you can. Like I just mentioned now, they have insufficient materials to do data capturing for those who want to participate in this election. You have a role to play there. Keep doing the good job, and we are proud of the work you're doing. We'll always be here to engage with you whenever we are needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kalu. Festus, please respond to the questions on the voter registration timeframe and access to voting for persons with disabilities. And if you have any other concluding remarks, make those as well.
Yeah, you know, I listened to my friend Benjamin on the issue of voters registration. You see, one thing we must realize is that this whole issue of continuous voters registration has been going on for 9 months. It's been going on for 9 months. And for that 9 months, we've been begging Nigerians who are registrable, who do not suffer any legal disability, to come out and register. Not only that, we also created an online platform so that the young generation of Nigerians who are internet savvy can begin their registration and then conclude at any of our offices. What we have done is to move the registration to the 8,809 registration areas of Nigeria on a rotational basis. Now we have concluded the first, second, and third quarter of the voters registration exercise. The fourth quarter begins today. And for this fourth quarter, we have deployed additional materials to all the states of the Federation for purposes of capturing those who want to register. So I want to assure you that this particular commission is proactive, and we are not going to leave any Nigerian behind. Any Nigerian that wants to register, we have an opportunity of being registered, and we are not going to shut out anybody. But I want to say that the moment the voters registration process ends in June, we are not likely going to extend the exercise. So people should go now and get themselves registered. We have deployed additional materials from today. So if Benjamin goes to his constituency, he will see that we have deployed additional equipment for purposes of voters registration. And we are listening to the people and paying attention to what people are saying. On the issue of persons with disability, I think that Samson has covered the field. We have been working with various organizations of persons with disability, with Inclusive Friends, with the Albino Foundation, and so on, to gather data on where persons with disability are in the electoral process. And we've been, even with the voters registration exercise, we're also gathering data of where persons with disability are, so that we can deploy assistive materials appropriately. If it is magnifying glasses, we want to know where to deploy them to. And we have been printing brave ballot guide and also deploying other assistive materials. But we want to deploy to the targeted places where these persons are. So we continue to work with the organizations in terms of improving access to the various polling units. In relation to the issue of vote buying and the issue of election spending, if you look at Section 88 and Section 89 of the Electoral, you will see that the Commission really has minimal role to play. And the Commission is overburdened with conducting elections and the issue of prosecuting those who violate the law sometimes takes a backstage. And that was why the Commission supported that we should have an Electoral Offences Commission and Tribunal that will arrest, investigate, and prosecute the election offenders. It is still in the National Assembly, and we believe that the National Assembly should accelerate work on that so that it can be removed from the Commission and given to a separate and independent agency to deal with. Well, in concluding, I want to say that we will continue to engage with the various, with the critical stakeholders in the electoral process in terms of improving the electoral legal environment. We want to make incremental changes in our electoral process, and part of that incremental changes or incremental change came with the Electoral Act 2022. In terms of our processes, we continue to review our processes, and we continue to consult Where we have not done well, we will acknowledge that we have not done well. And where we need assistance, we will seek for assistance. But this organization, this commission is focused, and we are ready to make the changes necessary to have free, fair, credible, and inclusive elections in 2023.
Thank you very much, Festus. Samson, over to you for a concluding remark.
Well, from a Yiga Africa perspective, three things will determine and define the 2023 elections. One is electoral technology, two, the independence of INEC, and three, young people, because we are beginning to see a lot more interest on the part of young people building on the NSAS protest, as well as the current economic situation of the country. So these three key issues will define the 2023 elections. But to say that we're very optimistic about the elections, and we will continue to engage and foster continuous dialogue. And like Honorable Benjamin said, it's about implementation. The good thing is you have an electoral commission, and I was quite happy and excited when APC, the ruling party, had its leadership crisis, and INEC issued a statement to draw their attention to some provisions of the law that if the party does not comply, with provisions of the new electoral act, then some of the decisions and actions the party takes, will be notified. So encourage INEC to continue to act like the regulator, because as you regulate the conduct of our political actors, you're also protecting the democratic process. Same also goes to the legislators, that it's not enough to have passed the legislation, but to also continue to provide the necessary oversight on the institutions that are implementing this law, and to urge also the international community that Nigeria requires a lot of support in ensuring that the elections are very, very successful. But we'll remain optimistic about the future of our democracy, and the whole world should look forward to how Nigeria will renew its faith and its commitment to democratic advancement in the 2023 elections. But thanks to you, Chris, as well, for also having me being part of this discussion. Thank you.
Just like to thank all of our speakers for the time they've taken today and their thoughtful presentations and responses, and the truly hard work that you all put into passing the Electoral Act this year. We wish you the best of luck as you continue your preparations for the 2023 elections, and we will continue to support and engage as best we can. Thank you also to all the audience members for joining, participating, asking questions today. We hope that you'll join us as we host future discussions as Nigeria moves towards the 2023 elections. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.